One of the things that's really important for trappers to know is the market as to where their skins are going to go at, what they're going to end up being used for. And for wolves, wolverines, bears, the most important market is going to be the taxidermy market. A pelt that's handled properly for the market can bring as high as $500 sometimes for taxidermy skin. When we start missing parts on it, the price drops really quick. So the market is taxidermy, rugging it, so they'll make a bearskin rug or a wolverine rug with a plastic head and teeth. It can be handled slightly different than a full mount. So that would drop the price by probably $200. The next cut would be if you're going to do like a wall hanger, and then it's going to be a lot less. So you take a $500 pelt, if you make some mistakes in skinning it, it now turns into a $200 pelt. The bottom end of the market is going to be trim, or else the garment trade, what we normally skin for. If you're missing all the claws, the pads, the inside lips, the ears aren't done properly, it becomes a piece of trim and it's worth like $100. So if your market starts at $500, you can quickly turn a $500 pelt into a $100 pelt. So this is an example of a skin that's improperly handled, and what it will end up being is either trim on a parka, or it could be sold as a wall hanger where somebody would like to buy a wolverine and just hang it on their wall. But the value of the skin compared to a taxidermy style goes from like $500 in taxidermy, well handled, to like $150 when it's handled like this. Now if you look at the way that the feet are handled, there's not enough material left on the feet in order for them to do a mount. And in this case, actually in the back foot here, there's actually some claws missing. So it really quickly takes it away from being a taxidermy skin. Now if it's missing just one claw or two claws, you could skin it out properly and they can put in claws on it. But if it's missing, if it's a damaged foot like this one here, it cannot be used for taxidermy. Taxidermy skins have to have the complete lip on it. And there's actually an inner lip, and I'm going to show that today, how you skin the inner lip so they have the material to put it on a mount like that. Now the same as this wolf here. When you're looking at this wolf, one of the first things I see is a great big eye hole like that. They need to have quite a bit of material from around the eye in order to put it on a mount like we have in front of us here. And again, you need to have the inner lips done. There's just barely the outer edge of the lips here, and it's not enough material for them to attach it to the mold properly. Also, if you look at the feet here, because the feet weren't skinned out with all the pads on them, again, you can't make a mount out of it. So it quickly eliminates this skin from that top end of your market. So when you're handling a wolf, a wolverine, or a bear, you're going to skin it what we call complete skin, with eyelids attached, inside lip split, ears done properly, feet done properly. You have to scrape the skin so that there's no extra fat on it. Now on average, it's going to take you anywhere from 5 to 8 hours to skin a wolverine skin or a wolf skin properly for the market. It's a lot of work, and you want to make sure you pick the proper skins for it. Not every skin will work for taxidermy. Taxidermy guys like the biggest and the heaviest furred skins. That's the ones you're going to make the most money from. Small skins, damaged skins, you might as well skin them for the trim trade or for the wall hanger trade, because that's where it's going to end up. It's not going to bring you the same amount of money. For wolverines, you're talking wolverines over 36 inches, and for wolves, you're talking wolves over 54 inches when they're measured out. The different tools I have laid out here in my toolkit here make the job of skinning much easier, and it allows me to give a professional job. Everybody's worried about having a sharp knife, but just as important as having a sharp knife is to have a really good fur comb. This is a dog slicker brush, and you should brush your animals 3 or 4 times before you actually skin them. There shouldn't be any debris or anything left in the skin. It should be brushed right out so it looks like it's going out on a date. You definitely need a tail stripper, a pelting knife, some sort of pelting knife. A pair of pliers are really handy for when you're doing the bones around the feet. A pair of heavy-duty scissors are really good. A bone of some sort for fleshing, and I also use a draw knife for fleshing. It's really important to get the saddle off of the wolf, and really important is to have push pins. And when you're buying push pins, buy the 5/8 size. They're a little bit longer than the 1/2 inch, and it's going to make a lot of difference for you when you're handling them. Just a little trick for you is to put your push pins in a piece of styrofoam, and it stops them from falling on the floor. So it's a nice way to have them laid out and easy to reach and not be a safety hazard for you. And I have one other little tool that I use quite a bit is it's just a big treble hook with the barb grounded off of it. And I use that for when I skin out the feet. And as I go through the skinning procedure, I'm going to be able to show you and explain to you why it's such a valuable little tool to have as an extra. So I have a fancy little tool kit that I use. I'm able to stuff all my tools within my case here, roll it up, and it's great for flying. So the first thing that we're going to want to do when we want to skin a whole wolf like this is a couple of things to take into consideration. If you have to do it out on the land, I'm going to show you a couple of little things that pay attention to, so that later on when you get it back into your cabin or back to your house and you're going to skin it, how you can save some time out in the field, especially with the feet and knocking off at the first joint, the lips and the head. Number one thing you want to make sure you do before you start to skin them or before you start to process them is give them a good fur combing. I have a number of different combs with me that I use, coarse fur comb, a dog slicker brush, or even at the pet store you can get yourself a regular dog brush. But it's really important to give it a good combing over. Make sure you don't have any sticks or pieces of dirt or anything in it. Brush it completely out. And when I do the other side, I'll flip them over here and I'll give them another good brushing. If you have any blood, always try to control it, because the more you get it onto the skin, the more it'll stain it. We're going to wash this wolf to show you the washing, but it's really important to try to control the blood on it. If he's snared, a lot of times there won't be any blood at all, but if you have to shoot it because it was alive, I usually try to shoot it in the chest, right through the brisket here, or across lung to lung. And the hole will plug up and you won't get blood all over the place. If you shoot them right in the middle of the head, you're going to have blood all over the place, and it's a big deal to deal with. So you're always better off to try to control right from the start. Now the first thing I like to do when I start to skin them is I start at the back paw here, just below the pad, and I run my knife from the pad here at the start all the way up to the elbow. So you start here and you're going to skin it down to the joint here. Okay, and then the next thing I'll start to do is I'll start to skin out the foot here, the leg here. Now I like to start with the legs first again, because when you get to the leg, it's a big animal to deal with. You know, the wolves can easily go over 100 pounds on you a lot of times, and you want to try and do as many steps as possible before you're trying to lift them around to deal with them. I'll get it out as much as I can on one side, pick her up, and then start the whole process again from the other side. And always, like I said, to be careful that you don't nick it. Okay, so once I have the leg out, I'll actually cut it here at the joint and take it apart. And I'll do this now, and then I'm able to skin the rest of it when I get back. So basically what I've done now is I've started skinning it, and I've taken it apart at the joint so that I can process the foot part of it later on, and it buys me a lot of time, especially when you're out in the field and you're wanting to skin it right away. I'll repeat this process with all 4 feet so that, again, I can process this part of it, which is critical to have on it. You got to have all the claws and the pads complete, and you can do it at a later stage. Now sometimes what people will do to make this step a little easier for you is they'll take a rope and they'll tie it off, and they'll be able to handle it a little bit easier. But we're not too bad off here. We're on a pretty firm table, so we can pretty well skin away here. Now another little trick you can do if you're going to hang it up later is to skin it up to the elbow joint here, and you can take this piece of bone out, and it just makes it easier to, when you're later on when you're skinning it, if you hang it up, to be able to get it off. So I'm just skinning it out here a bit more. I'm trying to be really careful not to put any nicks in the skin itself. The two front feet are processed now. And again, I'm always kind of on the watch out. If there was a lot of blood coming around, I'd put some either sawdust on it or a paper towel or just something to make sure I control any leakage, because the cleaner you work, the cleaner your skin is going to be in the end. Now, the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to cut around the head here a little bit. And it's really critical when doing this to make sure you have the complete lower lip and upper lip with the inner lip so you can split it later. And there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can skin from the tail and the back feet down and skin it off then, or you can start off and you can skin from the head here like this. What's really critical and where a lot of harvesters missed out is they don't get this inner material for the lip here. And by skinning at the head here, starting it off at the head, you ensure that you can completely capture all of the inner lip here like so. And you got to be really careful, because if you nick it, if you put a hole in here, it's really difficult for the taxidermy business to hide cuts in short hair. In the longer hair in the body, if there's a mistake, they can hide it easily. But when the short fur on the legs and on the snout and whatnot, very difficult to hide. So take a few extra minutes, take your time, make sure your knife is sharp, make sure you know what you're cutting, and trim it properly. So this is the material you want. And you can see we've basically, see how much more lip material. All this material in here is what we're after. And after, we're going to show you how to split it. And you'll see there's quite a bit of it. And once you have the inner lip complete like that, the other area that's critical is around the eyes. You have to make sure that it's you get the complete eye with the eyelid attached. And again, when they're attaching this to the mound, when they're missing material, it makes it, they have to do weird things to try to recover if they can. And sometimes that's, again, it'll take the difference between a well-handled skin suitable for taxidermy and make it a poor skin because it's not all there. Okay, so I'll do one this way, and then I'm going to skin it down the other way from the head, just to show you the two different methods. So that eye is done like that. Okay, so once we're at this stage, we're ready to turn it around, and we've got the lips, the inner lips complete with one eyelid. We're going to turn it around. We're going to start the back legs, pull out the bone on the one leg, and then cut it, and then we're going to hang it up and start skinning it. So once I have the front skinned out like that, the next thing I can start to do is the back legs. And again, it's the same sort of deal. I start just in front of the back pad, and I make a cut, and I split it from the back leg towards the vent hole in the longer fur like this. And I make my cut so that it is on the belly side of the vent hole, because it's really critical to keep the complete vent hole attached, or the bum hole, whatever you want to call it. If it's missing, what happens then, they can't do a complete mount. They have to tuck the tails down to try to hide the piece that's missing. So if you ever see a dominant wolf out in the woods, he always walks with his tail. The alpha male and females walk with their tail up in the air. And to do a really nice mount, sometimes they want to mimic that. They want to keep the tail up. We have to make sure that all the parts are complete. And having the anal opening attached to the skin is really critical. So again, it's the same thing. I start skinning it out, carefully trying to not put any nicks in anything. If you're doing, I mean, we're in ideal conditions here. Sometimes you're going to be right out in the land and you're going to rough skin it right out in the bush, and you're not going to be able to go as slowly as what I am. I never claim to be the fastest skinner or the best skinner, but what I'm trying to do is pass on things that are really important in the handling. You know, if a wolf freezes completely on you, it can take sometimes up to 3 days to thaw out. And but try to ensure that it's completely thawed out before you skin it, because you're going to want to skin it when it's thawed out and not frozen, because when it's frozen, it's really hard to feel your knife and you'll end up putting little nicks in it. So I like to have a bit of paper towel on hand all the time in case I get any blood at all, so I can quickly clean it up. Sawdust will work really good to do the same sort of job. So what I want to do is keep this joint, so I'll split it, I'll break the bone here further back in order to still have a good piece to process once I get back to the camp or to the shop to work on it. So I would leave it so I would have this attached so I can hang it, but I still have a substantial piece in here that I can actually work to pull it through. I start just behind the pad here, and I just walk my knife up, and again I'm bringing it right down to the anal opening here, but on the belly side of the opening. Okay, so I've joined my cut, and you can see the anal opening's here, and my cut is on the belly side. And it's the same sort of drill. I go back and I start skinning off the back leg here again. And if he's really fresh, you can a lot of times take your fingers and then work it off without so much knife work. Now we've hung it up in a skinning gamble, and it's I'm able to work away here, and I'll start peeling them down. And again, careful to not put any holes in them. You're better off to leave extra material and flesh it off later than try to get too close and nick the fur. So you just kind of work your way along here, take your time. And this is where you'll start running into some fat. There's generally a lot of fat in the belly area. And when I'm working with my knife, I'm usually always behind it, and I try to cut not on the skin so much, or on the fur so much side as on the carcass side. So if I make any mistakes, I'm cutting into the carcass and not putting a hole in the pelt. And sometimes what's important is to have the ability to have it hung up here like this, and then have the ability to swing around. Because it is such a large animal to skin, it's not like skinning a fox or a marten or something. You need to have a bit of room to be able to work around it. And now what I'm doing right now is I'm skinning out the back legs, heading towards the vent hole in the tail. And the biggest jobs in skinning a large animal like this, and most animals in skinning, is to get the back legs off and the tail out. And once you have that complete, the skinning job itself tends to go a little easier for you, because it's basically a lot of pulling after that. Well, not bad today. Okay, so one of the things that I've done here is I've made sure that I have the complete butthole attached to it. Okay, and I'm skinning it out here. And again, it's critical for a taxidermy mount to be able to have that still attached to the skin in order for them to not have to tuck the tail to try and hide it. So we're skinning out the tailbone here. And generally speaking, a wolf has a pretty solid tail. And what we do is we'll split it, and we split it on the bottom side of the tail to be a top side with color in it, and then usually the bottom side is white. Center it, and just run our knife not quite to the butthole, but back that way. And the whole idea is to get it to come out here. You gotta completely get the bone out of the tail here. Now this is a tail stripping tool, and if I got enough of it out, a lot of times I can just pull the tail right through like that. So that's a handy tool for pulling out the tail. A lot of the really hardest part of skinning this wolf is complete now. We're going to raise it up here a little bit more, and we're going to get the rest of the skin off the carcass here. Once you got the tail out and the back legs, you can basically, with your knife, just work on the skin line and keep your knife on the carcass and just continue to work and peel it. Now if it's really fresh when you're doing this, sometimes you can pull most of this off without having to use the knife. Sawdust will just cause it to plug it up and gel it up like. It's an excellent absorbent. Now ideally, if you have a high enough shed to work in, and you hang it like this, you don't normally have to bend over like this. You can just keep raising it up and skinning it. Now another trick that guys will use sometimes is they'll actually flip it and put it in the skinning gamble in reverse and use the weight of the skin and the carcass. They'll tie up the skin and it'll use the weight of the carcass to actually skin it down. And it'll actually pull down as you work the animal. So instead of being hung by the back feet, you'd hang it up by the pelt itself and leave the carcass loose, and just the weight of the carcass then continues to pull the hide right down. Okay, so we're just about up to the neck here. We've got the front legs out, and pretty well have the bulk of the skinning done on it. The only consideration that you're going to have to watch out for now is to make sure you have enough for the ear material. And again, always try to keep the skin as clean as possible. With wolves, I always recommend that you wash them. And it's incredible sometimes how much dirt you'll get off of it. This is the ear butt, and it's important to make sure you have a complete ear, because again, if you don't leave enough ear material, they can't. So that's the ear and the ear butt, and it has to be complete in order to, again, make a proper mount. And there's a real critical step that we're going to show you on how to split the ears so that the ears themselves are separated so that they can dry properly, because if you don't dry them, then they rot, and it ruins the skin for taxidermy again. Now, one eye we did on the we skinned it already, and in this eye I'm going to show you how you go nice and deep when you do it from the top down, and you get all the material here, which is really important. Your eye opening should be complete with all the material from the eye. So you can see there's quite a bit of extra material here that we left. We took off with us as we skinned it here. And that's it, we got our hide off here. One of the most critical steps in handling a wolf properly for the taxidermy market is to ensure that you have a complete foot. You got to have all the pads and the claws attached. And the way I do it is I use a regular fish hook, a large one. I grind the barb off, and I'm able to insert it, and it gives me something hard that I can pull on to skin this thing down now. So the next step is just to start and carefully skin it out now. So the whole idea is just to work it off, work it down like a sock, and just carefully skin it out. And again, with the hook like that, you're able to pull and give yourself some more leverage on the foot. And you got to bring it down to the very tip, to the end of the toe. Now you're going to find the outside toes are shorter than the two center toes. And the whole idea is to get it right down the joint to the tip where the toe is. That's the last thing you want to have attached there. And probably the first time you do this, you're going to find it a little bit difficult. But after you do a few, you're going to get more confident at it, and you'll find it's relatively easy to do. Now I have an array of different tools that I like to use on the table here. One of them is a pair of pliers, just for gripping it and giving it a tug and getting it to come out further. So that I can get it right down to the tip of the toe here. And we have this one just about to the end here. And you can see just the end of the claw in there is really what you're looking at. You're right down, you took right past the outer digits. And what I like to do for myself to make it a little simpler is I do the two outside ones first. And this allows me to kind of pull on the inside one, which are longer than the two outside claws here. And you'll get it right to that joint like so. Now the two center ones here are definitely longer. And again, now because I have the hook and the two outer toes out, I'm able to grab hold of it and skin it down quite a bit further here now. And there you have your foot skinned down to the last toe, and it's like a sock. So if we pull this back out and push the toes back out, you can see that I have it skinned completely down and everything's intact. It's one piece. So the toes are there, the claws are there, and the main pads, which is critical. And I'm going to show you in a second how we're going to clean them right up with the scissors or a knife, whatever you like to use, in order to get the pad material out of there so they'll dry properly, which is critical. So when you're completed, you can see that the inner two are considerably longer than the outer two, and you have to make sure you get that section of bone out right down to the tip of the claw. And when it's done, you can push it back out. And you have a complete foot. All the pads are attached, claws are there. And that's what we're looking for. And you can see it's basically split to just before the pad. So you repeat that process on each foot. Now on the front feet, there's a little dew claw that you have to watch out for, which is right here. So it's considerably up from the rest of the paw here. So you want to, same process, basically skin it out to the joint. Keep it attached, so that's the little dew claw right here. So on the front feet, you'll find it's easier, sometimes quicker to put a hole in it because the toes seem to be a bit longer. So you got to just be careful with it. And again, the same process. I like to skin out the two outside toes first. And get it right down into that claw again, to the tip of the claw. Okay, so again, you've got to get right to the claw. So you're getting the main piece and the second piece, and then you're just leaving the claw part attached to the skin. Now once you have each paw skinned out, you have to clean up the material that's in the pad here. There's quite a bit of fat. In the pad of the animal's foot, there's quite a bit of material that has to come out. It's like a white fat material. Now you can do it two different ways. You can skin it out with a knife with a heavy duty pair of scissors here. These aren't the scissors you're going to find in somebody's sewing kit. They're a real heavy duty pair. And I just go around and I carefully trim off the excess material. The scissors are very sharp, and it's easy to put a hole in the pad if you're not careful. So whether you like to use a knife or a pair of scissors, the key, the castle here is to make sure that you clean up this material so it allows the foot to dry. Now something else to watch out for when you're skinning a foot is there's a certain bit of material that's doubled up here, and so you want to open that up so the foot can dry properly. So it's kind of like the toes are webbed a little bit in there, so it's the material that's in between each toe. Pop this out. In between here that you want to make sure it's opened up to the end. But when you're done, you should basically have everything opened up here. And like I said, there's a lot of different ways to do something. Some people are really good with a knife or an ulu to clean this out. Bottom line is, it doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you do it. So do a wolf up properly, and making sure that you've skinned out everything, split the lips, done the paws right. It's not a couple of minute undertaking. It takes you a few hours to do a good job. And it's not every wolf kind of deserves this much work. Some of the wolves you're going to get are going to be a lot poorer quality. So you might want to think twice about having to do all this extra work for it. But if it's a good wolf, good color, good size, this is the proper way to do it. I would say on average to do a proper job on each foot takes you about 20 minutes a foot. Basically your foot's cleaned up here and it's ready to allow it to dry. So this step now is the fleshing part, and I've just sprinkled a bit of sawdust on. It helps pick up the fat in the grease. And basically the way I'm going to do it here now is I'm using a draw knife. It's a double-handled knife. It's called a necker, and it's really good for fleshing. And the idea now is just to carefully work off the excess material. There's a lot of fat and grease on them, and what we're doing here now is working it off. Now, in a more traditional way to do it would be with the bone, and it does the same thing. And the whole idea of it is to work the skin and get that fatty membrane off. Now, either way works, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is to get it off. That's the thing that's important. So I just keep working it around. I've done one side on one leg. Now I'm coming over to the other side on the other leg. And generally what I'm using the dull side of my draw knife. This side is razor sharp, but I just use the back dull side. And I'm pushing off the excess material here. And what I keep doing is pulling it back up so that I work up here high instead of getting way stretched out and you don't have the power that you do. And your back will get sore on you. So the whole idea is to keep it up close to yourself and then just keep working it off. And once I get it going here, the saddle's coming off pretty good now. I just keep working it a little bit at a time, getting a couple inches here, a couple inches, and then just keep rotating around the whole skin like that. A lot of times once you get it going very well, you can pull a lot of the saddle off with your fingers and work it off like that. The whole idea is you have to get that saddle off in order to get to that layer of fat that's between the skin and the hide. So this is just hardwood sawdust, and you sprinkle it on, and it goes good for gripping. It absorbs a lot of the grease that's coming up, and I'm able to right away pick up the saddle and keep going here. Just bringing it down to the head here to look, see if there's anything there much to clean up. There's usually a little bit going back up to the ears here, but I don't spend a lot of time on the head. Two things you want to make sure here is that the butthole is still attached to the skin. And then the other thing you have to do is split the tail. So this is just a fancy little tool that I use to insert inside the tail. It's called a tail splitter. And then I just run my knife right down the back of it. And it splits the tail for me. Right down to the tip. So this, it's just basically a piece of metal that's folded, and the way it works is that your knife slides along the back of it and you split the tail. Now you'll see me pulling it out because there's big tufts of hair will get stuck in it. If you try to split a knife with a dull, or try to split a tail with a dull knife, it's going to rip the tail off. It's going to be very difficult to do. So the trick is to make sure your knife is sharp, and as you're going, take it out once in a while and clean the hair that pulls out with it, and it'll split really good for you. But it's important to have that tail split right to the tip. Okay, that's what you want to have. You want to have the tail split wide open from top to bottom. And be careful, look at your tail when you're doing it, and make sure you're getting the bottom of the tail. The bottom of the tail is going to be white, whereas the back of the tail is going to have color in it. See how the darker color? Whereas if you look at the bottom here, it's a white in the right place, right down the middle. Another important step when you're doing a wolf or a wolverine that's really dirty is to wash it. Now there's a number of different ways to do it. The simplest way is to get a 5-gallon pail and some water and a bit of soap. It doesn't have to be any fancy. Don't make the water too hot, just kind of lukewarm. And as you can see, I managed to get quite a bit of blood on this wolf today, and I want to take a few minutes and I want to clean it up before I put it on the stretcher. So basically we've fleshed it, we've cleaned the paws out. I'm kind of ready for the boarding step, but I want to wash it before I board it. Now again, the simplest way is to get yourself some sort of tub, a laundry tub in the washroom, a 5-gallon pail, whatever you have at hand. Then the coolest way to do it, if the wife will let you, or your husband will let you, is to put it in a wash machine and wash it in a washer and spin it dry. Or spin it, not dry, but spin it to get all the moisture out of it. But that's probably the best way. But the simplest way is just get yourself a tub, some water, some sort of soap. Can be Tide, Sunlight. We got Downy Ultra here. We put a little bit in, and you just basically put it in here. This water's clean, and by the time we have it washed here, you're going to notice it's pretty dirty.
And when you wash it, when it's fresh like this, just after you finish skinning it and fleshing it, you're going to see that the blood comes right out right away, and it gives you a nice clean looking skin. And we know from harvesting wolves that they're one of the dirtiest animals that we catch anyways, because they love to roll in anything to try to camouflage their smell. And so it's just natural for them to be really dirty. So washing them makes them a lot softer. They don't feel as coarse, especially our boreal forest type wolf, where they're a coarser type wolf to begin with. So by washing it, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy, you just put him in a tub here and just keep moving him around. You know, if he's really bad in some spots, I'll do it here, but you'll see quite quickly that I've taken this wolf that was full of blood here all over, and he'll come out really clean. Now I probably, normally when I do it, I'll probably do it 2 or 3 times. I'll change the water, I'll take it out, rinse it out, wring it out as best I can, take it out, change the water, and do it again. And you can see, looking in the tub here now, how dirty this water's looking already, and I've just kind of been moving around here just for a few seconds. But check the snout, because a lot of times you'll get quite a bit of blood around the snout. You can see, as we're doing it here, the light's catching it, you can see that it's taking everything out, all that blood that we had sitting on the surface. We're lucky to be in a lab here where I can put it right in a sink here for a sec, and I'll get rid of this water. You can see already the second time around here, it's already looking a lot better. And same thing again, we'll just get it into the tub here, and just basically put it in here and stir it around, and you'll see it cleans up stuff pretty good here. And again, it's just a matter of getting it in here. I don't really soak it for any amount of time. I just get it into the wash, clean up any debris, especially if there's any blood on it. We get a lot of wolves that'll come into the auction house, and they're still full of blood. It's caked on them, or they're still full of sticks and branches where he was caught. And you know, when you're selling something, you always try to make it look the best you can. And my reference that I like to use to people to explain it to trappers is that, think of it this way: if you're going to go out on a date, you don't go roll around in the mud and work all day. You do your best to get all cleaned up, spruced up, cleaned up. And it's the same thing when you're going to sell your animals. If they're full of blood or something, take the time it takes to clean them up. It might seem like a big step here to do this, but it makes twice the product when you're done here, just to take a little bit and clean it up like this. So once I'm done here, I look for the nose, and then I'll start bringing them out of the water here. And kind of rinse them off here. It's pretty wet, but it's a good wet because he's cleaned up here now. And like I said, the really best way to be able to do this, if you have it, is to put it into a wash machine with lukewarm water and wash it in a cycle, and then spin it so you spin all the water out of it. Okay, so this is the wolf now, after we've hung it up and let it drip dry, and we brushed it out a little bit, and you can see right away looking at it, it looks a lot better. There was quite a bit of blood on it from the skinning. There was some dirt in it and whatnot, so you can see that it's cleaned right up. There's no blood anywhere on it, and it's ready to go. So now what we have to do is turn it back fur in and place it on the board. So washing, I can't emphasize enough that giving it a quick wash like that is going to make your wolf look 100% better than if you just put it on the board, go right from skinning it and putting it on the board. It makes it cleaner, brighter, softer, and it makes a big difference in the price for you. So now we're going to turn them back fur in, and we've got to pull each leg out here. And we're going to get it on the board here now. Now always take a little bit of extra time and make sure your animal is on the board nice and square. You don't want to put it on the board sideways because it doesn't look good. And you start right from the beginning when you're putting it on the board to make sure it's up on the board in the right place. Now, a couple of little steps we have to do here before we can pin it is we got to work on the ears a little bit, and we got to separate the back of the ear from the cartilage on the wolf. So, to do this, there's excess material that you're going to want to get off. And you get the back of the ear here, and this is important. You start separating it off the back of the ear here, and you work on the cartilage and separate it right up to the tip. A little bit extra moisture here that I want to get rid of, so I just quickly clean it up with a paper towel. And then again I start, and I want to take it, and what I'm doing now is I'm taking the back of the ear right here and I'm physically separating it from the cartilage. And that, if you don't do this step, what happens is the ear is going to rot and the hair is going to fall out of it. And sometimes by the time they get to the auction house, we can smell them in the fur bag. And the first thing we got to do when we take them out of the fur bag is cut the ears off because they're ruined. So that takes your wolf from taxidermy and rug material or wall hanging material and makes it a piece of trim. So you don't want to do that. So you got to just take a few minutes here and work it. Now the other thing you can do is you can stick your finger in here and you can separate it. You can pull it off once you get it going here. I'm using a bit of paper towel here just for kind of a grip, and you can actually physically push it right down to the tip of the ear. So there's a number of different ways to do this. I've seen guys use a screwdriver and just push it inside, a flat screwdriver and push it inside, but the bottom line is it has to be done. That's what's critical about the deal. Now one thing you don't want to do is go too far and rip it open. You just kind of want to get it up to the tip there, and then that's it. Now if you compare ears now, this started back down here and we've separated it all the way up to the top here, so there's that much material that's been separated off the back. Now if you compare ears, there's quite a bit of difference there. There's quite a bit more material here. Okay? So we'll start the next one here. So it takes a little bit of time to do a proper job. And you see I switched knives, or I like you get used to doing different things with different knives and you switch off, but the bottom line is no matter how you want to do it, it's got to be done. As you're going down this and you're getting close to the tip of the ear, you're going to notice that the cartilage itself gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And as you get to the tip, you'll get to a point where it gets kind of dark. You'll see the skin, and there's no ear left. And the cartilage is very, very thin. And you want to be careful that you don't go past that and tear the ear. See, if you look closely, right here, it's very, very thin, but up here it's still very white and thicker. So there's still quite a bit of ear yet that has to come out. But on that side, at one spot there, I'm done basically. If you picture their ears, they kind of come to a tip. So as you're working here, you're going to see it's getting narrower and it finishes off in a tip here instead of being just kind of a blunt end. It's going to come up to a little bit of a tip. And like I said, if you don't get the absolute last half inch or 3/4 of an inch or whatever, it's still going to dry for you really well because you've separated the really thick part at the bottom, which won't allow it to breathe or dry. So that's separating the ear butts like that. You can see both ears. There's quite a bit of material. I remember when we first started, the ears were really small, and now they're quite long. And that's leaving the ear butt attached, okay? And then the taxidermy guy can decide how much he wants to cut off. But if you don't give him this material, he ends up with big holes by the ears and he can't hide it. Another thing you need to have is eyelid material. Now you can see there's about 1/2 inch of material here for the eyes. And that's important again because again they needed to attach it to the mold, to the plastic mold. And if you make great big eye holes, they can't do it. And they can't hide the stitches if you tear it. So don't hang it up by the eyes or put a piece of string through the eyes or something because it'll damage it like that. So basically I'm just cleaning up around the eyes here a little bit. And I'm trying to be very careful here not to remove any material of the you can see there's quite a bit of material there that they can use. Okay, and that's again critical. And again, you can split it a little bit and open it up so it'll dry properly. Now the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to trim the nose. Now there's too much material here, but again, you still have to leave a certain amount of material in there in order for them to be able to attach it to the mold. Now I'll probably take out about 1 inch. And again, you got to be careful here because you don't want to cut the short hairs and the snout here because they can't hide this if there's damage. So I'm going to cut off quite a bit of it. Taken off about 1 inch of material here, but I've still allowed enough so that the dark inside of the nose is still there. Be very careful because this is where the hair is the shortest. The hair is very short in the snout here like this. So if you put a hole here, they can't hide it. It's going to show up on the mold. It's going to be like a defect to show. So they can't hide that. So be very careful when you're doing that. Now, once I have the ears done, the eyes done, the nose done, I flip it over here. And I'm going to work on the lips. Now, if you look closely here, you can see there's an awful lot of material here. And what it's doubled. And what you have to do is take your knife and split that and bring it down. Okay? And when you do that, it leaves enough material. There's almost going to be enough material so when you have it on the board here that the hole's closed. It's going to double its size. But that's splitting the lips. And When people think we say splitting the lips, they think we're going to split it here, but it's not splitting the fur. It's actually the lips themselves to be split. So I'll just sharpen my knife up here. And when you're doing this, there's this, again, it's like the ears, there's a certain distance you want to take it down. And when you're splitting the lip, you start way back here, and you have about an inch of material, but you take it down to this black line just before the hair starting. There's a double fold there. So you'll see here as I get going. Okay, so you're going to get, like I start off quite a ways back. Okay, and then I just keep working it down, and you gotta watch where you're at with this. Okay, and you'll see as you're going here how to split the lip. And when you get, it's a combination of checking and then looking on the other side, feeling it with your hands to come to the right place. And as you get down close to the edge, then you're kind of looking for a heavier black line that's gonna come up for you. Okay, now see how much more material now I have from when I started? This was all back like this, so I've separated it so it can open. And now I got to go kind of like right along here and continue to do this. And you might have a problem with the first couple that you do, but the more you do, like anything, you're going to learn and you're going to get the feel for it and to know exactly where it is that you split it. But there's an awful lot of material here that most harvesters don't send in, and consequently it kind of takes away from the finished product. There's a good inch of material here that comes about when you do it properly here. And it's right up into the snout on each side. And there's even some material on the lower lip here that you can get. Okay, so there we go. We have the lip split here now on both sides. Okay, so now before I pin it to dry it, I'm gonna check it to make sure it's on the board square, lined up. And as I pin it, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the tail end. I'm going to start pinning out the tail first. Now, one of the things to check for is the length. And I'm going to grab a measuring tape here, and I'm going to measure this wolf, because whatever I pin it for in length, when we measure a skin at the auction house, it's measured from the base of the tail to the nose. And wolves that are over 60 inches are the ones that start bringing really good money. Taxidermy guys like large size skins. They're always looking in the market. They always want to have the largest size skins. So I'm just going to grab my measuring tape and I'll give it a quick measure. Size is very critical for the wolves. And one of the ways we measure them, we want to make sure they're a certain width. But once the width is established, it's the length of the skin that's important. And skins that are over 60 inches, this is about 62 inches here, are the skins that'll bring the most money. So, I mean, all wolves are good, but 60 inches is a good line. Once you get over that size, they go into triple X's, and they'll bring better money. The biggest wolves over 66 inches are the ones generally in the market that really do well. So this one's just over the line, so I want to make sure I'm going to pull it just a little bit longer to make sure it's well within that size when we turn it. Because as it dries, it always shrinks a little bit. Okay, so I pulled it an extra inch. There's lots of slack. I can pull it down a little bit more. I'm not overstretching it, but I'm paying attention to what the stretch is. Now, I'll start pinning out the tail, because I said earlier, it's critical that the tail dries properly. So I pin it for length, I pin out my tail, then I'll flip it over here and I'll do the back legs and the front legs. Then the ears, make sure the ears are laying properly. And always try to make sure the tail is nice and straight. It gives it definitely a better look to it when the tail's nice and straight. 5/8 push pins are the ones you want to buy. If you see cheap plastic ones, they won't go in the wood for you very well, and you'll be frustrated with them. These are 5/8 long, they're nice and long. And this wood, this type of board that we're using is made out of basswood, so the pins go in it really nice. I pin it right down to the tip here like this. Okay, so I've checked my size to make sure it's good. I pinned it for length first, pin the tail. The next step is I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to pin the back legs here now. Now, right away, the feet got to come out. They have to be turned back out so they'll dry. I don't worry about making big long legs on them. I'd rather have them relatively wide than long. Got a little bit of trimming to do here. So once I have my back legs done, I move up to my front legs. And this is where I'll use Martin stretchers. And I'll slide them up inside. Again, I'll turn my feet back out. Pin them up on the board. And I'll allow them to dry like that. And if I have a little bit of material to clean up, I'll pick away at it here. And then the next thing I want to do is work on my lips at the head here. These pins are very sharp, and if you just leave them in a tin or something, or try to pick them out of a can or something, you're going to stab yourself. So a good little trick is just to get a piece of styrofoam or something, and you can stick them right in. They won't fall out if you knock them off the table, and they're easy to retrieve when you want to use them. There's a lot of material here with the lips now, so you have to leave it slack. Pin the lip out, and when you stand it up later on, you can push the inner lips, let them hang out a little bit so they dry, because there's a lot of material here. I'll just stick that there for now, and then when I turn it, I'll apply some more borax and open it up again, and I'll pay attention to that spot sometimes. But I want the butthole to be complete and attached to the skin like that. Okay, so once that's all done, then I'll take it and I lean it up against the wall. I put it on a 45-degree angle off the wall like this. Try to keep the legs out a little bit, push them out a little bit, and then allow it to dry. And it's going to stay like that for overnight, probably a full day to get it to dry enough to turn like that. Wools take about anywhere from 12 to 20 hours to dry enough so you can turn it once it's dry. But you have to make sure you have to pay attention to this spot down here, and you also have to pay attention to underneath the front leg sometimes to make sure it dries. And the other thing I can do sometimes is I'll grab a handful of borax and I rub it in up in this area just to help give it a bit more time. Borax just kills any bacteria that'll start the decaying process. It's not a preservative or anything like that. It's more like a something that'll buy you some time is what it really does. When you're drying your pelt, make sure you give it enough time to be dry. When you touch the pelt, it shouldn't feel wet. It will feel greasy, but it shouldn't feel wet. And that's when you know it's ready to turn. If you leave it too long and you can't get it to turn, it's too hard, take a rag or a paper towel, wet it, and just wrap it and let it pick up moisture for like 10 minutes, and it'll turn very easy for you. And then reverse it back on the board like we're going to do with the next step of the video here. Once all the pins are out of it and you're ready to take it off the board, a couple of things you can do. If you're worried about it sticking on the board, you can use a belly wedge and feed up a piece inside. If you're still using a split stretcher, that's fine. You close it up and it's going to come off. The only thing I'll recommend about split stretchers is don't open them up wider than 14 inches. That's as wide as you need a wolf. You're paid more for the length in a wolf than you are if it's really fat. And sometimes we get wolves that'll come in and they're 24 inches wide. And the guy's lost probably 2 sizes in the length of it. So it's really important to make sure that you stretch it no wider than 14 inches. The board that we have here is about 12.5 inches, and when you get a piece of wolf on each side of it, an inch on each side, you end up with a roughly a 14-inch wide wolf here. So once you have it loosened on the board, you take the board right out. Okay. Now this is kind of like the first step, and you turn it around. Now before I go any further, I'd take my feet and I'll push them back out. Now they've dried a little bit hard, so a trick to use for that is to get myself a paper towel here, soak it with some water, and then just wrap the foot for a few minutes with some water, and it'll get pliable enough again to easily turn, and it won't affect the drying process. It'll still dry for you nice. And just kind of work it a little bit, soften it up. Even though you think you're re-wetting it again, you're not wetting it as much as it was before it air dried like that. And then once you do one, and as you work it, and it's pliable enough, then as I'm working on turning it, I just take the paper towel and I wrap the next one and get ahead of myself like that. It's a bit of a chore to turn them, and that's why you don't want to leave them too long. But once you get it turning, it'll come out for you pretty good. The buyer wants to know that every claw is there and that the foot is not damaged, so that's why it's important to turn it back fur out. Okay, then just take your time, push it right out again. You can see it's completely turned. The main pad is intact. Okay, and the complete foot's there. And that's what you're looking for. So kind of the before picture and the after picture. So as I work on the next one, I just wet the one ahead of me, and I go back to the one I've just wetted, and then get and work it, pushing out the feet again. So done properly, and turning them in the right sequence at the right time before they really over dry, should take you like 20 minutes, about a couple minutes each foot if they're right, and then you just kind of pop them back out. Now a trick that I'll use to make sure they dry is I'll stuff them I'll throw a bunch of borax in them. It's the first thing I'll do, and then I'll maybe stuff some paper towel in them just so they keep the shape that I want. And then after a couple days, I'll pull it out and I'll shake out the borax and throw some fresh stuff in again. But basically, I want to keep that shape so that the buyer knows that every toe and every pad and it's a complete foot. Now, because Wolverines and bears are sold for taxidermy, we want them to come into the market with the legs on the outside. If you take a lynx or a fox or a marten, we want the legs left inside. But wolves, wolverines are the opposite. They're case skin with the legs out. And again, it's because the buyer wants to know it's a complete skin. They want to be able to look at each individual foot. Okay, so you just basically reverse it. Push it back through the hole. And you can get it pretty well all the way through, and then you can just pull it from the other side when you turn it. And I like to do it now before I turn it because it's harder. I prefer to do it like this than stick my hand up inside of a greasy wolf. So I just get them like that, and then I can pull them through later on. Now this is good for turning. It's not too dry, but I'm just kind of wetting it a little wee bit just to make my job a little easier. You have to turn the ears back in. So basically what I'm doing here is just putting a little bit of moisture around the ears before I start to turn it. Because again, it's important to have your ears sticking out, and the buyer wants to know if you separated the ear cartilage, and he'll be able to tell because it has like a papery sound to the ears. If the ears are soft, they're going to know right away you didn't split the cartilage, which is a bad thing because usually the ears go bad. Or you're going to they're going to be rock hard, and then again they're going to know that you didn't split the ears properly. Now, what I'll do sometimes when I'm doing this is, if you see my fleshing beam earlier, you can see how it's pointed and combed. I'll stick it on the end of a fleshing beam sometimes just to help me reverse the skin here like this. Now, turning a wolf is important to do it at the right time, because if you leave it too long, it can be a very, very hard job to do if it's over dry. And the only way really to do it is to re-soak it a bit and get it going. And it's just a matter of pushing the ear right back out from drying from the inside there. So now the ear is out, and this is what I'll generally add: a bit of borax in and around the ear here. Borax does two things. It helps clean the fur is one of the things, but it's also like a kind of a preservative where it'll give it, there won't be any bacteria or anything to start growing in it to make it go bad. It'll allow it to dry without having any problems. And normally borax can be found in most of the stores up here. Okay, so we're going to feed the board back up into the wolf, and I always feed it up the back. I don't feed it up the belly side. And I take a little bit of time to make sure that it's put on the board nice and straight, because nothing looks worse than putting something on the board sideways. So I'll stand it up here. Check it to make sure it's nice and straight. Okay, don't really worry about jamming it really tight. I just get it snug on the board. Okay, first thing I'll do now is lay it down. And then I'll take a couple minutes here and I'll give it a good combing. Again, I want this wolf to look as best it can when it comes into the auction. And washing it and giving it a good combing is going to show the wolf the best possible way and give it the maximum value for the amount of work we just put into it here. So I'll brush the one side first really well, and then I'll pin them back out here. So the first thing I'm going to do is take stretchers, insert them back inside. Don't need as many pins as you had the first time, but you need a few. Now, again, this is when I'll add some borax to it. And I work it into each toe. And don't worry about it if you get it on the fur itself, because the borax always used as a whitener in laundry, so it doesn't hurt. I put a bit of borax in there to make sure it dries properly. The other thing you can do to help it dry is stick a bit of paper towel in it, and it just helps keep the toes spread and give it a nice looking finish. Okay, and I'll leave the paper towel in there for a day or two while it's still on the board, because I'll leave this wolf on the board for another day, day and a half, 2 days. Then I'll take it off the board, pull out the paper towel, and I'll hang up the wolf by the nose and I'll let it dry for another couple of days to make sure it's good and dry. I'm only putting 6 pins in, and it's just to keep the shape of the leg. Again, I'm looking for that best possible presentation so that when it has its date with its fur buyer, that it's going to look good. Now, once the feet are done, I'll go up and I'll check on the lips to make sure. If I need to put a pin or two in, just to make sure. Just to kind of hold it in place so that they're drying. If they were really wet, I might take a pin or two and just hold the lips down a little bit, just so that to make sure that they're going to dry properly. And then the 4 feet are done. Paper towel will stay in there till I take it off the board, and I'll just pull it out. Then I flip it over. Try to keep the ears just a little bit flat, but not straight down, just so they're on a bit of an angle. Come back down here, grab a hold of the tail. If there's any little bit of grease on the tail, sometimes there's a little bit of oil or whatnot that stays on the tail. I'll just throw in just a little bit of borax on it, helps absorb it. Put one tail pin in the end of the tail, and grab my fur comb and take a minute and give them a good combing again. And if you want, you can just sprinkle a little bit on it. Like I said, borax is a whitener, so it doesn't hurt the skin by adding a little bit to it. And this is just a regular dog slicker brush. It's a wire brush, and does an excellent job for long hair fur like this. Once it's complete, It's turned, it's pinned back on the board. And the last thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it, stand it up on the wall on a bit of an angle so the legs are out a little bit. Let it dry for another 1.5 to 2 days. Then I'll carefully take every pin out of it, pull out the paper towel that's inside the feet, and then hang it up again for another 2 days and make sure that it's completely dry. And I'll check it to make sure it's dry. I'll check the toes and make sure that they've gone hard and they're not still floppy and soft. And that's a good indicator. If they're still soft after a couple of days, you can knock all the borax out of it and reload it again and put a little bit more in if you want. And that should do it. It'll be ready for sale.